Holy Creator God, open our eyes to your holy presence. Open our ears to your holy call. Open our hearts to your holy love. In the name of our loving, liberating, and life-giving God. Amen. Good morning. Thanks for braving this horrific weather to get to church today. From ghoulies and ghosties and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night, good Lord, deliver us. This is from an ancient Anglican chant for children. And it was scary. You know, we're fast approaching Halloween. Oh, no. And growing up here in Indiana, I remember Halloween. You know, we made our costumes, or we got our costumes, and we dressed up, and we did all kinds of stuff. And then many times, too many times, remember, it was cold, it was wet, and it was rainy. And Mom said, you will wear a raincoat over your costume. And as soon as I got a block away, I took it off. She didn't want us to get sick. Guess what? We typically did get sick. It was terrible. But what is Halloween? What is Halloween? I was thinking about this last night as we were at Williams Park. People went by and wished us a happy Halloween. What does that mean? Halloween got its name from All Hallows Eve. It's the night before All Saints' Day. Okay? We have a service in our book of occasional services for Halloween, and it's like a litany, like the one that I started out. Not exactly that one, but it's like that one. That's an ancient one. And it's actually taken from a pagan Celtic celebration where they began a feast on their first day of winter and the first day of the new year. They celebrated winter, the start of winter, and the first day of their new year. So All Saints. So All Hallows Eve is the night before All Saints' Day, and All Saints' Day commemorates all the saints known and unknown. And it's one of our 7 principal feast days of the church. We have a church here in the Diocese of Indianapolis named All Saints. And they have a service on All Saints' Day where they name all the saints. And you can imagine how long that takes. We're not doing that. But it's also one of the 4 recommended days for baptism. It's one of the few feast days that you can actually move to a Sunday. So there are some feast days that we can actually move to celebrate on Sundays, and that's one of them. So next Sunday, we are going to celebrate All Saints' Day. And Reverend Amy's going to be our preacher and also talk to us afterwards about her book, her new book. And we're glad she's going to be doing that. Many churches now, then, the day after All Saints' Day, who knows what that is? All Souls' Day. So this is a triduum, a 3-day period where we celebrate those that have gone before us. We celebrate the communion of saints. And we also then on All Souls' Day, we celebrate our ancestors, those that we love that went before us. Now many churches, ours included, have rolled All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day into one. So that's what we'll do next Sunday. So our presiding bishop, Michael Curry, when he first took office, he said, he coined this phrase. He said, he announced to the world that we are the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. And at St. Augustine's, where we were before this, we had a big sign out in the front yard, and it had a picture of presiding Bishop Curry, and it said, we are the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. And a clergy person down the street called me and said, hey, Jim, what's the Jesus movement? He was Presbyterian. You gotta give him a little slack. Bishop Curry also said this, and you've heard Reverend Yvonne say this, if it ain't about love, it ain't about God. If it ain't about love, it ain't about God. And I like that. I like that a lot. That has a lot to do with the Jesus movement. What do we think that is? Well, that's all of us. It's you and me acting in the most Christ-like way we can. It's striving to be like Christ. That's our calling. Maybe you've heard people talk about having the mind of Christ. We are to be Christ-like. We are to be Christ-like, to do what Jesus would do. Or better yet, to do what we think Jesus would want us to do. I think we should have bracelets made that say that. What would Jesus want us to do? Not what would Jesus do, but what would Jesus want us to do? That's what we're called to do. That's what we're called to be. So here we're reading again from the Gospel of Matthew, and in these closing chapters of this Gospel, Jesus moves from the religious leaders to the crowds, to his disciples, to the cross. And in today's reading, Jesus is still addressing the religious leaders. And it's almost like he's winning in a game of Trivial Pursuit, but it's not trivial. He has stumped them. They were silent, so they come back. Now, an interesting point here in the Gospel according to St. Luke, the story that you just heard is located as a preface to the parable of the Good Samaritan. I always like to point out things in the Gospels that make us go, I wonder why Luke put that there. Maybe for clarification. You know, on the surface, it seems pretty easy, right? His response today. He's asked again by those trying to trick him. In some Gospels, they think maybe Jesus is trying to be tricked. In another Gospel, and I can't remember which one it is, it's almost as if they are asking him because they really want to know. It's a scribe who's asking him because they really want to know. And they say, which commandment is the greatest? Now keep in mind, there were 613 or 632, or I don't know. There were a lot of them. It depends on who you talk to. There were a lot of instructions. There were a lot of laws that they had to obey. And he pinpoints this, and it seems he defines religion to them. He defines religion. He says religion consists of loving God. And out of all the verses in the Bible's first 5 books that Jesus could have picked, he picks Deuteronomy 6. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law, the Torah, and the prophets. Remember, Jesus is Jewish. He's not Christian. He's Jewish. And this audience would have heard these words and recognized them immediately. They would have been familiar to them because this was part of the Shema that was recited in the synagogues and is still recited in the synagogues to this day. And the Shema is the basic and essential creed of Judaism. It's the first text which every Jewish child is asked to memorize. They commit it to memory. So it means that to God we must give total love, a love which dominates our emotions, a love which directs our thoughts, and a love which is the dynamic of all of our actions. And all religion starts with the love which is the total commitment of life, your life, our life, my life, to God. And we're supposed to feel this all-consuming love of God. And that's hard sometimes. That's hard. That's very hard. Now, the second commandment we heard in the Old Testament reading today from Leviticus, thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. You see our little sign on the piano? It's been there a while. It just wasn't put up for today. It's been there a couple weeks. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So I think Jesus boils this down to 3 things. Love God, the love of other people, and the love of self. So that's the one that's hardest for me. We have to love ourselves. How can we love other people? How can we love God unless we love ourselves? That sounded like I don't know. And that's good because I don't know. we must love ourselves. If we're to love our neighbor as ourselves, then it's incumbent upon us to love ourselves also. We are created in God's image. We are God's holy people. Each of us must not only love our neighbor, but we have to love ourselves. We have a horrible statistic in our country. 40,000 people kill themselves in the United States on average. And if you want the exact numbers, in 2021 it was 48,183 killed themselves. In 2022 it was 49,449. It's not only sad, it's unacceptable. The psychiatrists say it's because of a sense of guilt or a desire to punish oneself. But if we believe that we are God's creation, and if we are all created in the image of God, we must think well of ourselves, and we must help others to think well of themselves. We are all well made. We are all God's handiwork, and we're created in the image of our Creator. And that's how we have to treat each other. But that's also how we have to treat ourselves. And they say children learn by example. How many have said this? Do as I say, not as I do. You've heard that, right? I've said that. I don't care. Do as I'm telling you, not as I've done. We can't do that. We have to set the example. If we don't teach our children by example to love themselves, how are they going to be able to love their neighbor or to love God? The only way we can love God is if we know God, and to know God, we need to be present with God's community, where there's a loving embrace, where we follow, love all, serve all, include all people, no exceptions. And that also means accepting them the way they are, the way God made them. They're perfect as they are. And that's how we have to accept them. Over a year and a half ago, the clergy of this diocese, when asked by the bishop, what could she do for us? The response was, we need a diocesan youth minister. Bishop Jennifer listened, she responded, and we have the most fantastic diocesan youth minister. Have you guys read the news? Do you get the news? She's fantastic, Heather Kennison. She's been described as a faithful, creative, and brave diocesan youth minister. And she led the first mission trip we'd had in 5 years in her first month of being employed. Baptism by fire. But she came with a wealth of experience. And there's been this renovation team that Barbie has been a part of, and they've worked together for a year to create a smart and sustainable vision for the future youth ministry in the Diocese of Indianapolis. And we all met this Friday evening, and we took part in some exercises that were put on by Ministry Architects, which is an organization that helped put together the vision and the values and the mission we seek for our youth. And then the renovation team came back on Saturday, and they're tweaking it, and they're continuing to tweak it. But I'm going to give you just a little flavor of a draft here of what they put together. The youth ministry of the Diocese of Indianapolis equips congregations, leaders, and caregivers to welcome, nurture, and celebrate youth, and provide safe, inclusive communities who seek justice, foster belonging, and form lifelong Christian disciples. And I think part of that, and a very important part of that, is to let our children know that they are loved and accepted exactly as they are, which means we have to do that. We have to set the example. How can we live into our own mission statement to love all, serve all, and include all people, no exceptions, if we don't include love of self? No exceptions. No exceptions. That means we have to love ourselves. No exceptions means everybody, including us. And that's hard. That's hard. That's hard. That's hard for me. They say sometimes when you preach a sermon, you're preaching to yourself. Today I'm preaching for myself. It's hard. But the way we can do that is spend time with each other and spend time with God. We do that in prayer. We do that here. We do it in the service work we do. And we do it when we connect with every single person that crosses our path. May we all learn to love ourselves and to love our neighbor as ourselves and to love God. Amen.